Hey everybody, it's Brady with Pure Intentions Coffee. Thanks for joining us for our lunch and listen today. Today we're going to be talking about how to brew coffee when you're traveling, whether you're camping in the front country or camping out of your car or heck, even in a hotel room. We're going to be joined pretty quickly by my good friend Ben Helt from the Specialty Coffee Association, as well as the co-founder of the Campfire Coffee Cook-Off. So I'm going to get some of this stuff ready to go and bring Ben in, and we'll get started in just about 2 minutes. Thanks a lot. And here's Ben joining us now. I've got most of this stuff put together, so we'll just wait for him to join us here. There he is. How's it going, Ben?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me, Brady?
I can hear you great. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm getting kind of a distant sound check here
Excellent,
with
excellent.
the
Wow,
headphones. All right, welcome. Welcome to my
awesome.
backyard here.
That's a
Yeah,
great
it's
looking backyard, Ben.
yeah, and it's the coolest part of the yard. There's something about it's a hot day here in Kansas City, but for some reason down here around these bluffs, kind of in this little valley, it might be just in my head, but it feels like maybe 5 degrees cooler down here, at least perceived, you know. So
Excellent.
anyway,
Well, I planned on joining from my backyard too, but a couple of things
yeah,
changed, and so now I got a picture of a tree behind me, so
there we
that
go.
counts for something, I'm sure. Yes. Well, we've got a lot of people that have joined us so far and are watching. Thanks to everybody that's joined us so far. So we're going to be talking today about brewing coffee while we're camping. Now, whether that's camping out of a backpack or camping out of something that's closer to your car, or just kind of making coffee at the beach or wherever you are on the road. That's what we're going to be doing today. But before we get started, I wanted to take a second and briefly introduce ourselves. I'm Brady. I'm the Education Equipment Manager here at Pure Intentions Coffee in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is our Lunch and Listen series, which is this thing we've been doing for the last couple of weeks. It's 12:30 every Friday. It's where we just kind of have a fun conversation about something where you can learn a little bit more about coffee, some other aspect of it that we may not cover, that may not be set right for a formal class setting. Um, I'm our education equipment manager. I'm also the scoutmaster for BSA Troop 200 located in Huntersville, North Carolina. So making coffee in the woods is something that is really near and dear to my heart. So looking forward to this conversation today. We're joined today by Ben Helt. Ben, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sure. I also work in coffee education. I work for the Specialty Coffee Association. We have an education program we deliver that many of you might be familiar with, the Coffee Skills Program, and it's delivered by authorized trainers around the world, one of which is Brady. He delivers that program as one of their offerings there at Pure Intentions. And I am the director of that authorized trainer program. I also work in curriculum development with our coffee technicians program, which is forthcoming in 2021. But before that, I had a roasting company and cafe here in Kansas City. Sold both of those, and the roasting company has grown into a much larger business than I had ever anticipated. Many of you might be familiar with my friends over at Messenger Coffee over there, and they do a great job. And then I've sold some green coffee over the years, and then joined the SCA full time. recently to work in education.
Thanks, Ben. You know, one of the reasons I thought about inviting you over to join us for the conversation today, Ben, is I know you do a lot of cooking cooking and brewing coffee while you're camping yourself. And I know you're associated co-founder of the Campfire Coffee Cookout. Campfire
Yeah.
Coffee Cook-Off. Wow.
Yes. A lot
So
of syllables. Yeah.
yeah, what? So
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit more about that? What that
Absolutely.
is?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief because I know we have some coffee to make. But if you're a fan of making coffee outdoors, you're probably also a fan of making food outdoors. And the Campfire Coffee Cook-Off is a culinary competition outdoor where teams of coffee professionals come together to prepare breakfast over open fire and pair it with coffee made without electricity. And this was born out of the U.S. Coffee Champs being in Kansas City a year ago. Well, the last time they happened happened in Kansas City. And there's so many people in the coffee industry that love to smoke meats, love to barbecue, love to cook outdoors. Because of our history when it comes to barbecue here in Kansas City, we thought it would be fun to have a smoking competition. But we wanted to have a category that was focused on coffee. And my friend Nick Robertson of Messenger Coffee and I were just brainstorming about how we could involve coffee in something. We came up with this fifth category of breakfast. There was so much excitement around that category, we scrapped the rest of the contest and just focused on this. And with the help from a lot of friends in the coffee industry, I think one of the things I love about it is it brought several people from other companies together to celebrate coffee and cooking. And it kind of just went across any of the competitive lines that we've had amongst roasters here. So we had help from Nick Robertson at Messenger and Sean Hunziker at Copper Canyon and Marty Rowe, you know Marty, with Workbench Coffee Labs. And we had some friends with Martin City Brewing Company. Split Log Coffee was involved, and Simeon and his group just did an excellent job of helping us out. Of course, there's other sponsors. One of the things that made it so amazing is Lodge Cast Iron came on as one of our first sponsors and just spoiled all the competitors with some free cast iron and some other goodies. And I got to tell you, Brady, when we dreamt this up, I think we kind of talked about what our recipe would be, like what we would do in these categories, which I'll mention here in a moment. And I can tell you, had I been a competitor in this competition, I would have just been embarrassed. Like, there's no way I would even come. Like, if there was a space lower than last place, they would have put me there. These teams, I expected one team to be very Food Networky, very culinary, and they all brought their game. It was so amazing. The categories that we had was a classic American breakfast, and so meat and carbs kind of thing. So like your meat and eggs, uh, breads, biscuits, and cakes. That's your carbs category. And then we had a veggie vegan category. And then we also had an origin inspired. And in this category, you took some culinary cues. It didn't have to be breakfast from that place, but you took some culinary cues from that country and incorporated them into your dish. The winner of that, the folks from 1900 Barger, the Petrin brothers, served us this bowl of, it's a Chinese dish. It's like pho, but the Chinese version of pho, with some roasted seared pork belly and chicken. And like, I would pay $25 for it today. It was just amazing. So we have another one scheduled for September 19th. We have teams slated to come in all the way from California to the state of New York, Oklahoma, Arkansas, other parts of Missouri. We don't know if it's going to happen with COVID-19 restrictions and whatnot. Obviously, it's all about the competitors and them feeling safe and people wanting to come out and watch. So if it doesn't happen, we'll just move it to the spring, but it will happen again someday. So that's a little bit about the Campfire Cook-Off, and folks can just Google that, search it on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll happen across it. So
Some
enough about that.
pretty incredible. There's some pretty
Yeah.
incredible pictures from that I'd encourage you to check out, including some of the different coffee brewing methods. Now, some of the rigs are going to look kind of like what we're going to be doing here today, I think. Although
Mm-hmm.
there was some pretty wild stuff there as well.
Absolutely. That was fun.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. So, we're going to kind of go back and forth here a little bit. We're going to start at the
Okay.
beginning and talk a bit about, what kind of kit you might need and what approaches you might take for brewing coffee when you're camping or whatever. And obviously, the first thing that we want to talk about is, what do we want to do? What kind of coffee do we want to use, and how do we want to prepare the coffee? So, obviously, when you get coffee, if you're buying it from your favorite local roaster, it's going to probably, hopefully, come to you in whole bean form. It's totally fine if you want to pre-grind it before you get it, but if you are interested in the very, very toppest of top-notch, high-quality camping coffee, you probably ought to be using a hand crank grinder. Now, this is my hand crank grinder. It's great. It works really well. I have not used it myself in a really long time because I don't want to carry the extra weight when in my backpack when I'm out there. So it's totally fine if you're really looking for the kind of the highest quality pre-grinding or grinding right before you use it. Spending that minute or so is maybe worth it. If you're just looking for something that's substantially good and better than average and better than maybe instant, you can absolutely pre-grind it before you go. We will not shame that. I always pre-grind before my long weekend outings myself, so I'm happy to. You pre-grind, Ben?
It depends on the situation, and let's put a pin in that. Maybe I'll talk about that when I'm going to show, for the group. But it really depends on the negotiation I have with myself about how the weekend's going to go.
Yeah. Well, it certainly isn't going in my backpack because that thing weighs, I just weighed it, it weighs 9 ounces, and I'd rather spend that 9 ounces on something else and take the slight hit. So pre-grinding, not necessary. What I definitely do recommend you do, though, if you are going to pre-grind, is do yourself a favor and pre-portion. So what I usually do, and what I'm going to be doing here when I brew here in a second, is I'll just make an individual portion, and I'll either put a bunch of individually wrapped portions in a zip bag or something like that, or if I've got a couple of those little tiny Ziploc bags kicking around, I'll portion into that, and that way I can just dump it out. I don't have to do any measurement there in the campsite in the morning. I can just dump it in and go. One of these devices that I'm going to be talking about here in about 15 minutes is it actually is entirely pre-portioned. So pre-grinding is fine. Pre-portioning is recommended. And then when we're storing our coffee, a lot of this stuff depends on, if you're going to your Airbnb at the beach, you don't need to worry about necessarily critters getting into, bears or trash pandas or little mice getting into your food. But if you're camping in a spot that looks a little bit more like where Ben is, or, we do a lot of camping in the Smokies, you're going to want to be sealing your coffee in a odor-resistant bag, and probably storing it with the rest of your food, either in a bear bag, or if you're in a location that requires bear canisters like this one back here. So you want to keep your coffee with the rest of your food because it is smellable, and a bear or something may want to investigate it, and they may chew through your side of your pack, or they may try to chew through you to get to it. So we definitely want to keep everything smellable away from us when we're camping, when we're in our tents. That's going to come and be a consideration when we talk about our backpacking brewing devices and methods, because that has some interesting implications for what we may choose. But that's a little bit more of a niche conversation. What I'd love to do next is talk about some more kind of less restrictive, more open front country car camping or hotel coffee rigs. Ben, would you like to share some details about your favorite car
Sure.
camping rig?
Yeah. I'm going to readjust over here to this table. Hopefully we can see. All right. So for me, I find that making coffee outdoors really comes down to a negotiation with yourself about what you want to do. A lot of the people on this call either already know how to perform precision brewing, or they have access to people like Brady that can show them how. And so I'm finding myself in a time of life where I've done pack all the hand grinders and take those with me. I've done making coffee in the airport. I've done, making it in a lot of, strange places. particularly when it was myself that I was making coffee for, or maybe one other person. And I'm finding that now I'm much more often to be in a situation where I'm making coffee at a group camp. So I'm typically trying to serve coffee to 5 to 7 adults who are ready for coffee, and are taking care of other business. They're handling fire, they're getting ready to do the cooking, and it's become my responsibility to take care of the coffee. And so, because we know that we can achieve precision, what kind of things are we willing to give up? What's going to be most important to us? Is the Instagram post the most important thing about your effort to brew coffee, or is it not? For me, I don't know, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. More often not lately. And so it's about, what am I willing to give up to make that morning achievable for me? And for me, in these group campout situations, I'm trying to make my load out as light as possible. I'm trying to make as much coffee as I can at one time, even if I'm making multiple rounds, and make it a bit of a crowd pleaser for the folks that I have with me. I also, because I just know how I like to enjoy my mornings around the camp, I don't want to be measuring anything. I don't want to be the guy. I've been the guy at the campfire that packed his Chemex, packed a scale, and was measuring things, had a thermometer, did those things, and that's great, particularly if that brings you joy. My friend Nick, that I've mentioned several times, what brings him joy at camp is just doing AeroPresses over and over for he and his wife to share, and they love it. And so he's willing to sacrifice the time and the other things that you would do at the camp out to grind that. Now, if I'm serving 5 to 7 adults, I'm using an amount of coffee that I don't want to sit there and hand grind, because quite frankly, I'm not sure if I have the arm strength to make it through 100 grams with that. I don't know if I have the endurance. So here's what I use. I use let's start with the filter material and the filter holder, and then I'm going to work my way back to the water. But the end game is going to be me starting with 2 liters of water and making coffee using a size 6 Melita holder, Melita cone. Melita doesn't make this cone, this filter here. I'm trying to get it in the light where you can kind of see it. But you can search size 6 Melita. Oh, there we go. These are available on Amazon and whatnot. Brady can probably hook you up with a link to get you there from that. And then size 6, not size 4, size 6 that you can usually get from a local grocery store. They're a little harder to find. They're not in every grocery store, but you can find them in some. And so that's going to be my goal, is to use that. I also use the Coleman Peak stove. Comes in a nice little tight box. If you buy the smaller fuel can, it packs really nicely into a tote for your trip. I also use my Coleman stove to light coals for my smoker and my grill outside, so I usually buy the larger of the 2 fuel cells for the Peak stove. Now, Brady, before we started, I went ahead and heated this up a little bit to kind of Julia Child this thing a little bit, have it already kind of hot, so it shouldn't take too long. Let's talk a little bit about water for that, because I know Brady's also going to talk to you about water. I don't want to measure the water. So a lot of times I will either, when we're buying our drinking water for the trip, I'll make sure I'm buying 5, like half-liter or 1-liter bottles, right? Or I will take a container like this, buy spring water so that it already has a TDS of around 26, right? And I know it's not got chlorine or anything else in it. And then I'll take water from my house where I have a charcoal filter, taste and odor filter, and I'll just cut it in half. That usually gets me around 165 TDS, which I know we're not focused on TDS as much anymore, but for me that helps me get in the range. I also know that this percolator that I got at Walmart, it's available a lot of places, it's a percolator, and I've taken the insides out so that I have a perfect 2-liter canister in which to make the water hot. There's a spot in here with holes, and I know that at the top of a certain set of holes, that's 2 liters. Why? Because I took the time to measure it before I left, right? So then I know that. That's one less thing I have to do while I'm doing that. Yeah, you got that percolator? Yeah, that's a very,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
common.
I marked on it on the outside with Sharpie so that it
There
reminded
you
me to
go.
go to this line.
Uh-huh. Also in this situation, like I said, I am willing in this group camping situation to forego some freshness of the coffee a little bit in order to get this thing done in a reasonable amount of time and still enjoy my morning. So I have these little 4-ounce bags left over from business. I don't really remember where I got them, but I got my hands on some, and some of you probably have enough context to get that as well. Now, if I have some extra water at the table that's not already pre-measured, I might go ahead and pre-wet the filter, but I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes then I look out at the group and I say, are they going to appreciate me rinsing this filter or not? And when they're asking me if I brought cream, maybe not. So okay. So I've got it pre-portioned, just like Brady would in this nice little airtight pack. We only have to worry about trash pandas here. We don't have to worry about bears like you do. So I have not been in a camping situation where I have to worry about protecting myself from that kind of animal. Now, while this is heating up, these percolators are great, but they're not thermal. This is not going to hold the temperature well. And I know that this is a slow drip system that I got here. So I know that my contact time is going to be long. I went with a coarser grind with this setup, and also a little bit not as heavy on the ratio here. And so I know that this is going to lose temperature over time, but I also know that I'm going to have a prolonged contact time. So I figure that's still going to work out okay for me because of how long it's going to be in contact. It's not a fast brewing method between those two. I'm trying to think what else I need to share about this. I'm using some coffee from a small local roaster here, Notion Coffee. I stopped by and grabbed their stuff. You would have thought, since I was doing this with my friends at Pure Intentions, maybe somebody would have sent me some coffee. I mean, come on.
That would have been a great
I'm
idea.
teasing.
That would have been a great idea.
I'm teasing you. Yeah.
I'm,
All right.
I'm glad you mentioned percolator there, Ben. That's a real popular, I know a lot of people do use percolators for larger format brewing like this. And, we in the specialty brewing industry like to kind of hate on percolators sometimes. But the funny thing about using percolators in the mountains is when you get above about 5,000 feet, your boiling temperature of water is well within the ideal range, around 200 degrees of water. So percolator while you're camping, especially in the mountains, absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm. I'm also willing to sacrifice some precision pouring, Brady.
Yeah, well, you're about to see me do the same thing.
Yeah, a lot of agitation going on for me pouring this in there.
Cool.
I wonder if I don't know if I'm going to be able to arrange folks getting a look in here, but I'm just going to repeat that sometimes you really need to take into consideration the contact time and adjust everything, not just around that, but make sure that you're considering that in whatever brewing method you're using. All right, so I'm just going to continue this brew. Once I'm done with all the water in here, it's done. And I will enjoy it in this mug. I got this one out just to show you, Brady.
Oh,
that's from
nice.
We're thinking
nice.
1984. I think
Beautiful.
I quit right afterwards. Oops.
Nice. I got this one. I got this one to so you can see this one too.
Yeah, there we go.
This is a U.S. Coffee Champions enameled mug. While you're going to continue to brew that, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to use a pour-over device, so I'm going to be doing almost exactly the same thing that Ben's doing, only I'm going to be doing it on a much smaller scale using a couple of different devices. Now, I'm really partial to the pour-over style or gravity drip style brewing devices, just like Ben. So I'm going to be showing two different ones here. But just like Ben was doing, I'm going to heat up my water here first. I'm going to be using my backpacking jet boil for this because this is so this should bring this water to boil in just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to start it now, and we hopefully won't blow things up in here, and then we'll continue to talk about what I'm using today. There we go. So when my jet boil is going, there's two really popular brewing devices that a lot of people like to use and talk about in backpacking communities. And one of them is this ultralight Java drip by GSI. This thing, it's foldable, it's packable, it's super rugged, and it actually only weighs, because when we're camping out of one of these, we care a lot about weight, right? This thing weighs right at 11.5 grams. So this brewer weighs less than the coffee that I'm going to be brewing with. Another one that a lot of people really like I hope you guys can hear me over the sound of my kettle here. A lot of people talk about and really love to use the AeroPress when you're brewing. Now, this is a wonderful brewing device that I use a lot here. We use this in all of our brewing classes. It's fantastic. It makes great coffee. My two qualms with this in a backpack camping environment are it's heavy. It weighs 180 grams, so that's just over 6 ounces, which is a lot of weight to put. And if you're having to put all of your smellables, which anything that comes in contact with coffee, into a bear canister or a bear bag, that real estate is at a premium. And this thing is pretty large as backpack brewers go. So I love the coffee. I don't love the form factor and the weight. So we're going to set that aside for now. What I've been using more recently is this little thing. This is a folding leg coffee filter kind of thing. It's kind of like a tea bag that you would pour, or a tea sachet that you would pour water through, except it's for coffee. So you can pre-portion your coffee, pre-grind it, and just tear that top open, and now it turns into a little brewing device that'll set into your favorite mug. This thing right here. You can get these empty on Amazon. They come in like 50 packs. They're not terribly expensive. Just look for a folding leg filter, I think is what they call them. Folding ear filter. Pretty cool. So I'm going to brew coffee using both this GSI Ultralight Java Drip and this folding ear filter so you can see the difference. So my water's boiling, so I'm going to stop making noise here. Ben, how's your coffee coming?
It's, I would say I'm probably about 80% poured. So like I said, a long contact time.
Excellent.
With this.
Which, you expect for brewing. You're brewing half a gallon of coffee there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the tips with using this folding ear style, I figured out pretty quickly, if you didn't hold the ears to the side of the mug, and this is my ultralight travel coffee mug, this thing weighs about 100 grams, so it's not bad at all. But the ears will fall in. So what I do is I always carry a rubber band with me when I'm camping. I use it to hold my hammock pieces together, but when I'm packing. But I'll just put that rubber band around those ears to keep those ears from falling in, and then the coffee is just down in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is, when I'm using my ultralight Java Drip over here, I've got my pre-portioned amount of coffee. Now in both cases, I'm going to be using 15 grams of coffee. I've got it ground about the same as I would for an AeroPress. So if you've got a home grinder and you grind your own coffee at home, you can grind whatever you would do for your AeroPress. If you're going to be buying it from your favorite local coffee shop or roaster, just ask them to grind it the same way they would for an AeroPress, which is a medium fine grind typically. Not as fine as espresso, but not as coarse as you would for regular drip. So here we've got these two brewers right here. I'm going to get you started here. Now both of these, comparing with Ben's 6-minute brew time, both of these are going to be finishing in about 2.5 minutes. So it's a very quick method. So I'm going to do the same thing Ben did, where I'm going to pre-wet the coffee just a little bit. Pouring that water right out of my jet boil here. That blooming. I like to let it kind of hang out for about 30 seconds when I'm done there, so that all the trapped CO2 can go out, and I know that the grounds are fully wet before I'm brewing here. And then
Hey, Sean.
I just kind of take and fill. It's done. Great. For this folding guy, I just fill this 5 times, and I know then that I've got the right amount of water through to brew my coffee. For this Java Drip over here, I usually just brew it until my mug here is about 2/3 full, and then I'll stop adding water at that point. So I just kind of wing it in terms of that. It's going to be delicious anyway. Not what I would do in my brewing classes, but we're camping. So is your coffee done?
It's getting there. Yeah.
Great.
Did you mention, you may have mentioned this while I was pouring or doing something else, but did you mention how many come in a pack of that filter holder you have? Like, what do they?
I think you can get different size packs of them. I think it's between 30 and 50. I could be wrong,
Oh,
but and
substantial.
the other thing is that you can get them some coffee companies. They're super popular in Taiwan and Japan, and you can get a lot of different roasters coffees in those markets. In our market, there's not as many roasters that are kind of on board with that. So, but you can find some folks that are doing coffee and selling them pre-filled in individual packages.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this I think is my fifth fill on this. So I'm going to be brewing about 8 ounces of coffee. Um, I like this question here. We'll talk about this in a second. But so I've added all of my water to both of these, and I'm just kind of letting them drip the rest of the way out. Um, you know, the nice thing about using devices like what Ben's using and what I'm using here are that they work operationally the same way as the brewing devices that your barista friends or we might be using for home or professional brewing. So you can find recipes and approaches and watch instructional videos about that and take those skills and just apply them straight across. So it's a great, so the challenges that you might face as a non-professional when brewing in the woods, um, I would recommend practicing beforehand. I can just kind of fall back on having been doing this for 14 years. But if you haven't used a new brewing device, just give it a try at home. Always test your gear at home when you're not depending on it to work, so that you can get better at it in a safe environment. Practice before you go out. Make sure you're familiar with your gear. This is done. This is done. Anything to add to that in terms of challenges that a coffee brewing novice might face when brewing coffee out in the woods?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I think some people are just naturally aware of, but if you've spent any time as a barista or in retail, you're really familiar with keeping the cleaning in mind at the end and making sure that you're ready to clean whatever it is. That's one of the reasons I like this setup, because it's easy for me to dispose and rinse off,
Yes.
to where all I'm really doing when I'm done with this is I'm just pouring a little extra water through this filter. The AeroPress is pretty easy to clean out too, because you just pop that out, you can rinse it and go on from there. So I think that's one, is we have a tendency to think about the end of the process, and it's not over when the last drip comes through. It's over when you clean it. That was the lesson I learned with French press at the
Yeah.
campsite. So I think that that's one thing that we would consider. There were some jokes here in the chat window, maybe not jokes about bugs and snakes and those things that you would watch out for in the woods. Are they going to interrupt or get into your coffee? No. However, that does speak to distractions. If you set yourself up in a precision brewing situation where you have family, kids, or others around you that can provide distractions, and you haven't prepared yourself with kind of a foolproof plan, then the scale turns off in the middle of you pouring and you can't remember where you were, and now you're guessing, you're doing some of those things. So reducing the chance that any distraction is going to keep you from a good cup of coffee is something that a coffee pro would be aware of, but you may have to learn that lesson the hard way. Plus, the thing is, if you start with good coffee and you've got a decent plan, and you're keeping your expectations realistic, chances are you're going to have a decent coffee experience. So not being too hard on yourself, I think, is key. And is it going to be 100% every time? No. But still, you're going to have the satisfaction of knowing that you brought something out there and you weren't just relying on, a can of cold brew you picked up at the convenience store. Although, that seems to be another very popular method that we haven't talked about, is those who enjoy cold brew, just like he has right there, that can be so versatile at the campsite, particularly if you take time to make some yourself without cutting it. Like if you make it in a concentrated fashion, and you can cut it with hot water, you can cut it with ice, you can do other things like that. Of course, that's all dependent on preference. Can I ask a question, Brady, of
Sure.
you? Okay, so
Sure.
in the chat here, and I'm standing far away, so I don't get to see everything everyone says. But I do know there were people talking about pros and cons of the AeroPress. And of course, you've shown some other things there. And they were talking, somebody made a comment about how you can pack several days worth of portions or servings of coffee into an AeroPress, depending on what your recipe is. And it got me to thinking, there is the weight, there's how these things work. Could you speak to the sensory differences, like the cup profile differences that may come from using a paper filter gravity brewer versus a paper filter or metal filter hybrid brewer where there's agitation and pressure and all that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of trade-offs, so it's always kind of neat to figure out. So because it's a full immersion method, this AeroPress, and we've got we're right at the 1 o'clock mark, so that's about when we
okay.
plan on starting to think about wrapping up. We'll go ahead and address this question and talk about a couple of things. But if you've missed any of this or you're just joining us, we are going to be posting this. This is going to be on our Instagram TV channel here, so you can check that out later. And it's also going to be available on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out, Pure Intentions Coffee. So sensory, I expect, because it's a full immersion, we've got, I tend to find that there's just a different, it's got a thicker, more robust body, and the aromatics that come out can be, well, not the aromatics as much. It's more of like the body, the thickness, the depth, the sweetness. So this makes a really sweet cup to me, which is fantastic. Now this GSI Ultralight Java Drip that I have here is a woven, it's a plastic fabric filter. So it allows a lot of coffee oils through. So I do get a much more intense aromatic aspect to the coffee. So it smells a lot more intense. Now this little folding ear filter here that I've talked about, it's a paper filter. So it is a very clean cup, very tasty as well. I'm glad that you mentioned the disposal thing, because that's one of the reasons that I like this a lot. I used to really love this GSI Java Drip a lot, and it's still one of my favorite brewers. But this is what I pulled out of my mug. Right, it's done. It's spent. It can just go right in my trash bag here, and be packed back in my bear bag with the rest of my smellables, and I'll just pack it out with me. That's a definite benefit to this folding ear style filter. Or the AeroPress. The AeroPress has got that great easy cleanup. You just popped it out and it's ready to go. Now, this GSI Java Drip, it's a zero waste. I mean, you're going to get some spent coffee grounds out of it, but there's nothing really going in a landfill. You can compost these. Disposal and cleanup in camp can be a little bit more challenging. The way I used to do it, and depending on your environment, it may be perfectly acceptable to just do a disperse, just fling them off into the woods, and they'll mix with the natural humus of the decomposing leaves and things. But if we're really sticking to leave no trace and trying to leave our environment as pristine without our impact in it, that's maybe something that a friend of mine that's a leave no trace trainer with the Scouts talked with me about that about a year ago, and that's when I made the switch away from this one. It's a trade-off, because you're putting something in the landfill here with this disposable paper filter, versus putting something into the environment. So it's a question of what's going to be the right solve for the area you're hiking in and the sort of ethic you want to take into the outdoors with you. But they all make delicious coffee. How'd yours turn out there, Ben?
Really good. I'm really happy. You never know how these things are going to go on camera, but I wish I could share with everyone. Here's what I would say. I would say the body is kind of light on it, but the aromatics are there. This is a natural Planata. This is a natural Colombia. It's got Colombia, Castillo, and Typica in it, and you can tell, like, it is a delicious coffee. But I think I went, with a really generous, like water to coffee ratio, so more like a 1-to-20. But I think it could probably be a little stronger than it is. But I'd love it if I was sitting around the campfire in the morning. This is great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It always tastes better around the campfire. And the nice thing is, the nice thing is that if you make it a little strong, if you plan on it being a little strong, you can always add a little bit more water to fine tune that strength. I tend to brew it a little bit strong and then dilute it down, because a lot of the fellow scout leaders that we camp with, they like to add a lot of cream and sugar, so I want something there. We'll take one more question, and then we're going to sign off talking about keeping devices level. You know, these will most of these you can get away with them being a little bit unlevel. I mean, a lot of times, I mean, I'm on a flat table here, but whenever I usually use this thing, it's kind of balanced precariously on a rock or a log or something. Um, I I don't see it as being a huge deal as long as it doesn't tip over. Make sure that you're doing this, especially if you're using your camp stoves or some of these stoves. You know, this one's got feet on the bottom of it. Make sure that all of your equipment is level to the point that it's not going to tip over and burn you, because that would ruin your camping trip if you got a big burn on your arm because you spilled coffee. But
Hmm.
in terms of an operations standpoint, I'm not super worried about keeping it level.
Can I chime in on that too? I know we need to sign off,
Please,
but it's
please,
so
please,
interesting
please.
you brought that up because of what I did before we started this session. Here's what I found. Everything that my son's name is Brody, so I keep saying Brody instead of Brady. Everything Brady said, absolutely. Here's what I've found. The bigger the batch, the more consideration you should put into it being level, particularly when you're putting, a half a gallon of weight on one of these things and trying to keep it level. It's going to allow you to maximize the use of both things to have that. I don't bring anything with me. I don't bring a level to make this happen. Typically in a car camping situation, there's going to be a picnic table or somewhere around and you can kind of achieve that level. But today, before we started this, I used my iPhone, and in most phones, there's going to be an app with a built-in level. And so I just laid it on both ends of this table and got it as close as I could, like within 1 degree of being level. So my message in response to you would be the bigger the batch, probably the more important level is.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you
Yeah, my
everybody that
pleasure.
joined us to watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once again, this is I'm Brady with Pure Intentions Coffee. This has been our weekly lunch and listen. I think next week we're going to be doing this with our head roaster Matt White. He's going to be talking
Oh,
about
awesome.
roasting and some flavors. But look for more information on Pure Intentions Coffee. Follow us on Instagram, Pure Intentions Coffee. And check out our YouTube channel. Just again, I'm repeating it. Search for Pure Intentions Coffee. Um,
Awesome.
check it out. We love helping people figure out how to make coffee better and enjoy it. Thanks for your time, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Go out and have some fun, everyone. Have some coffee.
Yeah. Enjoy. Enjoy.
Bye.
Take care.